liberty and justice for all.
City Clerk, can I have roll call?
Vice Mayor Marriott.
Here.
Commissioner Robinson.
Here.
Commissioner Maldonado.
Here.
And Mayor Petrilla.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thanks. All right. So tonight we have the budget workshop. I think you're up, Devin.
Yes, good afternoon, Mayor and Commissioners. Devin Schmidt, Finance Director for the City of St. Pete Beach. We'll be taking you through the proposed preliminary budget workshop. And so to kick off, I did want to start off with saying that we're going to focus primarily on our operating personnel revenues. Since we've already spent 2 workshops on our capital projects, we will respond to the recommendations from the Finance Budget Review Committee and the changes that was requested of the Commission since the last time we met. So we will focus on some of those parts. As I take you through this presentation, you will see that we're not going to cover every single page of the budget book. We would probably be here all night, but we will be highlighting certain sections of those pages with an emphasis and focus on the budgetary numbers and figures. So to kick it off, I think it's important for the Commission and the community to understand just the process that we've taken with this 2026 proposed budget. So staff started with the process in April. Then it went through our Finance Budget Review Committee with our workshop number 1, and then our workshop number 1 came to the Commission. Staff worked to incorporate any of those changes and develop while developing the personnel and operating budgets for the 2026 budget. From there, we brought back an updated revised capital projects list for the Finance Budget Review Committee to review, and then the Commission. And then from there, staff went through and implemented any of those recommended changes. And while we were doing that, each department met with the city manager and the finance team to go through every single line item in the budget and every single contract that's included in there. So that was the opportunity for the departments to go through, for our city manager to request any changes. And so here we are today. With the workshop number 3. We did go through the Finance Budget Review Committee last week, and we have their recommendations or questions that they may have had on this first pass. After this, we'll do the same thing again, where we take any requests of this Commission and incorporate that in the next iteration. And then we'll be back in July with what that looks like. So again, lots of opportunities for public participation, lots of opportunities for Commission input. So just wanted to kind of highlight that process and kind of where we've been as we've been working through this 26 preliminary proposed budget. So as we're looking at the Finance Budget Review Committee recommendation and comments that we received on July 2nd, some of those initial comments around there was really around financial oversight. And so the question came up, if a department is asking for a budget, what are we doing to ensure that they're going to spend it, or that we're not padding the budget, if you will? So we have worked with each one of the department directors for them to understand, don't ask for it if you're not going to spend it. So that's a capital projects, if that's operating. And then we're going to start putting in a metric of having a target of 96% budget accuracy. So we want each department to try to get to that 96%. There was questions around or comments around the revenue and the fee structure. So a question was raised whether or not residents should be charged for parking. Another question was clarification around parking, the parking transfer, which I'll cover in some of these other slides. And then credit card fees. Currently, the city pays for those consumer convenience fees anytime a credit card is swiped within the city. So a couple of recommendations there around the residents. We are undergoing a fee study currently, and so everything is going to be looked at with the fee study. And as far as the credit card fees, the recommendation from the Finance Budget Review Committee was to pass that on to the consumers like our peer communities are doing specifically for parking. So that is something we'll be looking at. There was a question around whether or not our recreation fee projections and our revenue estimates with the current state of our rec center are accurate or not too aggressive. We did reduce some of those down, but we'll continue to monitor those for accuracy. And our recreation department is currently working to reestablish a gym over there so that we can have that service back on track for our residents. When we're looking at taxation and those classifications, at our next meeting for workshop number 4, we will bring back, what does our ad valorem tax picture look like from a residential versus a commercial, and what are those different categories as we're looking through that? How many of those are homestead versus non-homestead? So we will bring that for the commission. Some other thoughts came up with internship opportunities, so looking at some opportunities within public services, if we could establish some civil engineering programs for public services. There was a question around our electricity and if there's an opportunity for our procurement department to look at bidding that out. Currently, Duke is the regional monopoly for that service, so that was our response to that question. For fine revenue allocation, so we're going to do some further investigation as to whether or not, if somebody is issued a ticket from Pinellas County, whether that comes back to the city or not. And then when we're looking at some ghost plates, so investigating if there's a potential fee collection related to unregistered or improperly tagged vehicles. So those are some follow-up items that we have. In our community programs and compensation, there was a proposal made to double the compensation for elected officials, but bring back additional data from comparable communities, looking at what's the population of that community, what's their budget size, what's the city size, and then what messaging and strategies would be brought back for the Finance Budget Review Committee. Suggestions included increasing parking rates and enhancing code enforcement to generate additional revenue, things like dogs on the beaches and those types of things. And then beautification grants, determine whether we could have some funding available for residents and businesses under those beautification grants that were previously offered. And finally, there was a question around whether or not we receive revenue for beach weddings, and beach weddings are permitted, so we do receive revenue for those. So moving on, this is our organizational chart as it stands today with our preliminary proposed budget book. So just wanted to show how the structure and what that reporting structure and the fund structure, how that relates back into our budget. I'm going to take the commission now through some of our financial summaries. These are meant to be very high level, the total budget picture for the city of St. Pete. So as you can see here, that our largest revenue generating fund is the general fund, followed by our wastewater and our capital fund, and then parking. Our wastewater and our capital fund do show up as the second largest revenues by fund because of those transfers that were currently offset from the general fund. So I'll take a deeper dive into that later, but I just wanted to provide that very high level overview. As we're looking at our expenditures, those are quite in line with what we just saw on the last slide. So again, general fund at 40%, our capital projects fund at 25%, followed by our wastewater fund at 18%. This is a high level overview and just a different kind of way to look at what those different funds are showing. So when we're looking at our governmental funds, that includes our general fund, our building fund, resiliency, multimodal, capital, and fleet. And in our enterprise funds, these are wastewater, reclaimed water, stormwater, and parking was a new fund that we created as part of this budget process for 2026. So we'll take a little deeper dive into each one of these, but wanted to provide kind of a high level overview for the commission. Similarly, when we're looking at our operating and capital analysis by fund, this is a snapshot of where some of those revenues coming from, what those other outflows are, and then what we're looking at for other sources. So those other sources is going to be those transfers that we're making from the general fund over to some of those enterprise funds. Oops. Okay. So we're going to take a dive first off into our governmental funds, and we're going to start off with the general fund. So I highlighted on this slide for the commission to see that our financial advisors, and one of the best practices is that we should be looking at a 2 to 3 months reserve for operating expenditures as a recommendation for any sort of emergency that the city may encounter. Now, we do know from Helene and Milton that that was closer to $9 million in expenditures, and so we will be bringing back a policy for the Finance Budget Review Committee to see first, and then the commission as well, to determine what is a good fund balance policy that the commission is comfortable with so that we're able to respond in any emergency and stay fiscally solvent. So this is taking a dive into really where those revenues come from in the general fund. So you can see about 50% is taxes, followed by our miscellaneous revenues. This is currently a placeholder, as that is actually our parking transfer, and I'll take us through that here in a minute. And then you can see that we have a small slice of the pie for charges and services. This is going to be anything that exists within our recreation or our aquatics programs. Intergovernmental revenues is going to be any things that are grants or anything that we're getting from Pinellas County. And then our permit and fees and special assessments is a smaller slice of the bucket as well. So this is a little small, but this was hot off the press when we met with the Finance Budget Review Committee. You can see St. Pete Beach is highlighted there. So you can see our total taxable value, and then our millage rate, and how we come up with our ad valorem budgetary revenue that the city should expect to receive every year. We took this a little bit of a step further this year, and that we looked at when the city of St. Pete Beach typically receives those ad valorem revenues and how our residents are providing or paying for those ad valorem revenues. So we learned that about 70% of our residents and businesses, anyone that's paying that ad valorem tax, actually pays in November to receive that 4% discount rate. So we did apply that 4% discount rate to our overall budgetary revenue that we expect to receive, which would put us at that $15.1 million. So this is our current estimate today. Other things that we're looking at is, how many homes are vacant and would not have to pay those property taxes. Right now it's about 91 homes that could apply to not pay for those property taxes. So those are factors as we're looking at the budget where we're really trying to get to that 96% accuracy. So some highlights or some assumptions and changes that you'll see. So taxes and fees, those are calculated on the prior year's historical. So we went back and looked on a month-to-month basis. When are we receiving those taxes and those fees? And then we looked at the year prior as well, so we could have a good determination about what is the history telling us, and what are those revenues that we're receiving as a city. Then we looked at our insurance proceeds. So working with our insurance provider, this is assuming that the current indemnification estimates come true. So anywhere where one of our buildings or facilities was damaged by one of the hurricanes, how much do we expect to receive back in? And you'll see that as a transfer out to our capital funds. And then we worked with our partners to determine for our category A and B reimbursements, which is for debris and debris monitoring, how much do we expect to receive in the next 12 to 18 months? And so that's included in this factor as well, because that's really bringing our general fund whole again from those expenditures that we paid out. And then I touched on this briefly, but our parking revenue from our new parking fund, we are transferring $3.2 million back into the general fund. And the intention there is how can we look at covering things like streets, beaches, parks, and a portion of our public safety contracts. So those are a couple of the large assumptions. So you can see here when we're looking at our 2025 actual, the largest is our property tax receivable. So that's where that budgetary figure on the ad valorem taxes, we're continuing to look at what those estimates should be, and so we'll continue to bring that back to the commission. As we're looking at some of those other areas, you can see under our federal grant FEMA reimbursement, we have about $4 million where we expect to receive that category A and B reimbursement sooner. And then I did want to highlight under those admin fees from building, wastewater, reclaimed water, and stormwater. Those are transfers back into the general fund for areas where things like internal services for human resources, finance, city attorney's office, city manager, IT, where we're supporting those enterprise funds, and it's a cost allocation back into the general fund. So that is an internal transfer that we do internally, and so you'll see that for that 2025 actual, that will be that exact budgetary figure. As we're looking at our next slide here, you can see under that miscellaneous revenues, we are going to break this out and have a separate line item. To be honest, I was fighting with the software at 10:30 at night, and I said, let's just put it here, and we have it. So we will have that brought back for the commission to see, but that is where we're looking to supplement those options. And then from our insurance recovery, we're looking at about $2.6 million back for any of the areas where they're looking to indemnify us and bring us whole again. The county EMS reimbursement is another large bucket of funding, and that covers approximately 50% of our EMS and fire services. So that is also a larger bucket of funding. And then a lot of these smaller items, the commission will see that we worked to break out pool and recreations, and so we can show what that cost recovery is when we're looking at some of our recreation and aquatics programs throughout the budget. Okay, so we're going to switch gears a little bit here and look at our expenditures. So some of our assumptions that are incorporated in this preliminary proposed budget, we do have a 2.6 cost of living adjustment for positions. This is based off of the May CPI. We will continue, and when June comes out, we'll look and see if that's gone up or gone down, and we'll adjust accordingly. We have currently no increase in employee benefits. The city did have experience a good claims, which resulted in a flat cost. Now, the commission might be wondering why we're showing the benefits as an increase this year. So what we are doing to date is, depending on if an employee elected a single plan, a family plan, or just self, that we are showing truly what they currently have elected in the budget. What we are going to be proposing is more of a per employee per month model, which is looking at not necessarily their current elections, but it gives the opportunity for us to have a flat budget. So if you have 5 employees in a specific budget, then you would be able to calculate that against that per employee per month instead of what the employee actually elected for benefits. It provides an opportunity, because benefits are always changing, people are changing, so it provides us an opportunity to have a more inline budget and a more accurate budget as we move forward. Currently, workers' compensation and property casualty does include a 27% increase. We were told that this is a worst-case scenario, and we're currently working with the provider to determine if a different deductible strategy would help us decrease that cost down. And that's based on claims, and obviously the hurricanes had impacts to what that property casualty looks like for the city. We're also, one of kind of our best practices, you'll hear me talk about that a lot, we are moving to shift our fleet and facilities, as well as our repair and maintenance and our IT related items, to be controlled by those departments that are the subject matter experts in that. So with that, you will see some shifts where our fleet, for example, would become almost a lease program through our fleet department. So they're the experts. They know how much preventative maintenance should happen, when we need to replace that vehicle, what the replacement cycle is different for a fire truck versus an administrative vehicle. And so that's where you're going to start seeing us not only have them manage it, but also plan for the future, so that we're putting money in so that by the time it needs to be replaced, we have that funding already set aside. And you'll see us do this with the capital programs as well in future years. Okay, so our expenditure summary. Primarily, you can see here that personnel services, which is inclusive of our benefits and is one of the larger buckets, followed by other uses, which is going to be those transfers out to the enterprise funds, and then our overall operating expenditures and expenses. So taking a dive, kind of looking at what makes up the composition of our general fund, we have the largest area is fire and EMS, followed by that non-departmental, which again is that transfer out to those enterprise funds. And then you can see public services is a large portion of expenditures there, and our law enforcement contract that we have. So these next slides, I'm going to try to blaze through them because I know we've got a lot to cover today, and this is on a more departmental lens. So if we were to zoom in on each one of those buckets that I just talked about, I'll stop and try to highlight if we have something that is a larger variance, but otherwise I'm going to try to scream through them. So we've got the City Commission here first. Not a lot of changes here for the City Commission. City Clerk, again, not a lot of changes here. We did have a request for a reclassification for an executive assistant instead of an administrative assistant, so that is one item. City Manager, not a lot of changes here for the City Manager's office. One item that we did include, those internships that we were talking about earlier with the way of public services. This is looking at having 2 internship potentials under our professional and contractual. So the monetary amount would sit within the City Manager's office, but those interns could be deployed as needed, highlighting that flexible staffing model and ability for us to pivot as an organization. So no changes to personnel. City Attorney, no changes to that contract. Community Development, we are showing here, and this is a good item for us to highlight. Throughout this budget, you'll start to be able to see what revenues or inflows are attached to each one of the different departments' divisions, so you can see what that cost recovery is based on either fees or charges for services and things of that nature. So not a lot of changes in community development here. I did want to highlight on our code compliance for one of the positions that this code enforcement clerk is actually an item that needs to be within our building fund. So that'll be a change that the commission will see the next time this comes back. So that explains a little bit the variance between what was proposed or what was adopted in 25 versus 2026. Planning, again, not a lot of changes here from an expenditure standpoint as we're looking at our planning department. Changes with the FTEs, you can see that as well. In our innovation and information technology, so this is one of those areas where we are looking to have IT control and manage things like telephone, our printers, our laptops. So this budget, you will see an increase here. There's also a request for an additional information technology business system analyst. Human resources, pretty flat. Finance and administrative services, we are requesting a pretty flat budget as well, with the exception of when you get to our personnel, there is a request. We currently have a 0.75 finance technician that we are requesting to be brought to a full FTE, just based on our current workload. In fire department, you can see here that our fire and EMS and those positions are pretty flat as well. You can see that this is where those charges for services come into play from the reimbursement from Pinellas County. So if we zero in on fire suppression, you can see the cost there. And again, some of these larger areas, if we are seeing an increase, workers' compensation and our fire and EMS is going to be a larger area where that 27% increase is going to have a more heavy effect just based on the nature of the work that they do. Okay, so this is our EMS team, and again you can see a further breakdown of some of those areas where we're receiving revenues from our county partners for the services that we provide there. Public services. So public services, if the commission recalls, went through a reorganization earlier in 2025. With that reorganization, with streets, parks, and beach maintenance, that is really being looked at as almost a public properties group. And so you'll see some efficiencies throughout where some of those positions are split in multiple different areas. They're able to work together, and it's a good efficiency for the city. So right now what we're showing is from 25 budget, we actually went down in overall costs. So this is our administration of public services. And again, changes here are primarily due to that reorganization that we had talked about earlier in 2025. This is our streets. Not a lot of changes here. Facilities management. I had touched on this item. This is an area, once again, where we're trying to have the subject matter experts, so the folks that know about our buildings and know about those different items, to be managing them within. So you'll see that R&M equipment went up quite a bit from our 2025 budget. This is our parks maintenance. So again, we have that nice revenue association for any of those rentals that we receive from the parks. And then just those changes as it relates to the reorganization that they did. Beach maintenance, this is an opportunity that we are working with our county partners to see if there's any ability for bed tax to help cover some of these costs that we're seeing with beach maintenance. The other item that we did change is we have a code enforcement officer that focuses specifically on beaches, so we are tying that to our personnel. Library department, another department that does have some revenue generation based on the Pinellas County Co-op. They also receive donations and things of that nature as well. So not a lot of changes here for our library services overall expenditures. Recreation and aquatics. So this is an area that is being looked at through the fee study. What are we currently charging our residents and participations of these programs? As a parent that has a kid in summer camp, I love what we charge. As a finance director, definitely needs to be looked at. So this is a good opportunity for us as we're working through this process here. So you can definitely see where we have some cost recovery in our recreation programs and where maybe we have some opportunity to look at changes there. So, sorry. This one. Overall personnel and recreation did go down, and so this was just changes within the organization through recreation and aquatics. Again, you can see within our aquatics what our revenues are and what we're projecting. So you can see here that we do have just a small decrease as we continue to rebound from the prior year and the recovery efforts. So this is non-departmental. This probably looks a little funny since it has all of our revenue sources. These are revenues that aren't specifically tied to a specific department. So these are just considered non-departmental revenues that are shared across the general fund. Here you can see where we are looking to make transfers over to our enterprise funds and then any outstanding debt service that we have. So that debt service is tied to our police pension. So that is showing just our current principal and interest that we have, but you can see here overall that we have some very large transfers over to our enterprise funds as well as our CIP. That CIP transfer is inclusive of the 2.6 million that has our insurance proceeds in it as well. So that is inclusive of that number. In our building fund, This is another area when we're looking at our revenues. We went and looked at sort of a historical what have we received. So this is showing somewhere in between 2024 and 2025 budget is where we're projecting that we think we're going to land with 2026. We know that there was a lot of permits pulled after the storms, and so we're going to continue to look at what revenues we're receiving in this fund and adjust accordingly. This is an item that we could always bring back to as a mid-year adjustment for the commission as well. So just wanted to highlight that piece. And then when we're looking at our personnel services with our limited duration employees and those items, there's also 2 requests for adding in personnel. So I'll jump to that for you. So 2 positions were being requested here, and one of those is a permit coordinator, and the other is a inspector intern. The resiliency fund. So we've been looking a lot into our comp plan and areas where this resiliency fund was first derived. From the understanding is that anytime we have an increase in our ad valorem taxes, 50% of that ad valorem tax should go over to this resiliency fund for resiliency projects. Since we're not projecting an increase in our ad valorem taxes, you won't see a revenue coming over to this fund. So just wanted to highlight that. In our multimodal fund, this is an area where this will change the next time this comes back to the commission. So that 1.7 is based on if it needs to be phased, but this is related to Tradewinds and Serata. So the expected development payout for the approved projects in our jurisdiction, we anticipate around 1.6 of those transportation fees to be provided. But the commission is aware that right now there's that MOU from the county that currently we have not adopted as a community. And so this would be if this number is going to change. So I just wanted to highlight that for you. Regardless of what that MOU looks like, these are definitely very general estimates for Tradewinds and Serata. And so those will be more of a phased approach. So this is a overall view of our capital fund. In our capital fund, we receive our projections for the Pinellas County cent that we receive for each one of our projects. We get that from them. The intergovernmental revenue is looking at any sort of FEMA reimbursements or grants that we currently have outstanding. And then the other sources, that's the transfer from the general fund, which is inclusive of that insurance revenue that we expect to receive back. So this is a very summarized version. Later in your book, you do have all of the capital projects broken out, and I'll get into any of those changes that we've made since the last time we've met, but this is taking and looking at it by what type of projects are included in the 26 budget. In our fleet fund, you can see that we do have other sources, and those other sources are anywhere where the general fund or any other enterprise fund is contributing back into the fleet. And so what we're putting together is a schedule based on the replacement cycle of each one of our fleet vehicles. When we need to replace that, how much it costs for us to replace it, and then what is our repair and maintenance costs to do any preventative maintenance or anything of that nature. So we changed this a little bit from how it's been previously budgeted for. So diving into our proprietary funds, this is taking the commission through all of them together. So this is kind of a holistic view of our enterprise funds. So we'll take a little deeper dive into those. In our wastewater fund, we have a $5.2 million transfer out from the general fund. We also are showing a small increase in those charges for services, and we're going to continue to monitor that. As the commission can see, our 2025 actuals, that's what we've received to date, so we are monitoring this, and that could come back. The ending fund balance with all of the capital projects that we're looking to accomplish this year is a little small for my liking, but this is where we are showing a balanced budget, and so we'll continue to refine those numbers and determine what the commission and the community is comfortable with. So this is just breaking it down again by where those revenue sources are coming from, what our expenditures are based on by line item, essentially. And then again, you can see the positions, and the wastewater fund is an area that did have some changes as part of that reorganization in our public services team. So this is our reclaimed water. We are projecting just a small decrease with that reclaimed water. Again, the fee study is going to be really impactful and helpful for us. We can bring that back at a mid-year whenever we have that information for the commission and the community. But wanted to highlight again that we're having to transfer over that $400,000 because even with just the operating costs, we're really not collecting enough revenues in here to sustain this reclaimed water fund. Stormwater, so our stormwater fund, I did want to highlight that we do have the transfer here from the general fund. We also are looking at if there's an opportunity for us to have a grant to help cover the cost for the Don Cesar redundancy project, so that's inclusive in here as well. Okay. And then diving into our parking fund. So brand new fund, which is why you're not seeing those 2024 actuals and those expenditures in here. Right now, parking has started to rebound pretty well since about March. So this is another area where we're looking at that month-to-month trend analysis to determine have we fully recovered from where we were in 2024 or 2025. So you are seeing this as a conservative estimate for where we expect to be. The largest expense out of that is that $3.2 million transfer over to the general fund. And then you'll also see here that we do have any of those positions that are currently listed within the parking fund. Oops, sorry. Next slide. There it is. Okay, this is taking the commission through funded position by department. So this is showing 160.68 positions for this 2026 budget. And then this is a comparison by department that we've talked about as we've gone through this presentation, what we had in 2025 compared to what is included in 2026. So for our capital improvement program, since we've spent a lot of time talking about these projects, I did want to just take the commission through what we heard from the Finance Budget Review Committee. So first off, the ask was to continue aggressive progress on Fire Station 22, so we have that in place for 2026. Gulf Winds Drive, they asked us to revisit that project, so that has been pushed out to 2027. Boca Ciega Drive, the bid we received in 2024 was for a complete street project at about $5.4 million. We adjusted that cost based on a reduced scope and removed out sidewalks with expansions. We also have a $1.5 million grant from FDOT that expires in 2025, so we'll request an extension on that one. The Mary Pier Bait Shack was asked just to not be demolished, and the generator project was a request to consider a less expensive alternative, and that's in progress. Fee study is underway, as the commission is aware. And then the Finance Budget Review Committee did ask for the staff to come up with compensation and benefits for comparable communities. I mentioned at this beginning of the presentation that we're going to bring this back again to the Finance Budget Review Committee, looking at population, budget, and some other factors as well for the Finance Budget Review Committee to review. So when we met with the commission last on June 10th, there was a request to reprioritize the dunes. So this was ranked as a priority 2. So we did reprioritize that to a priority 2. It was a 1. Revenue sources, we did update those at a fund summary level so that the commission can see where those figures are coming from. A fee study will look at the revenue generations for our building rentals. So what are we currently receiving in revenue from any of our rentals that we have? We updated the description for the hurricane damage seawall repairs project, listing out other grants as potential. So we started to list out where those grant sources are. And then phase 3 undergrounding was requested to be a lower priority than Boca Ciega and Gulf Winds. So that project was pushed out to 2027. There was a request to reprioritize the lateral service pipe replacement to a number 1 priority, so we did do that. And then ranking the Don Cesar stormwater project to a priority 1 with a phased approach. So that was also included as part of your packet. Simplified the streets project and delay the other layers in those projects, and so we have that as well. So these next slides are looking at a summary of all of our capital projects and any areas where we have some changes based on either the commission or based on the Finance Budget Review Committee. So again, that Boca Ciega Drive reconstruction, I already spoke about that one. We are showing a citywide security system. We are looking at an updated phased approach for replacement. The community seawall was one that came up as well. The project is required to be completed by 6/30/2026 as we have a grant associated with that. We updated the dune walkovers from a 2 to a 1, as I mentioned. Changes with our facility elevators rehabilitation. This was a staff-driven change. Elevator parts are on a longer lead time, so we're going to have some payments that extend into 2026. Looking at the hurricane damage right-of-way rehabilitation, this was one that we spread with improvements over 2 years. In our hurricane damage right-of-way seawall repairs, we removed the reference to E. Martina Drive. And then on our Paso Grill Way seawall replacements, we're looking to award a design build contract, so complete design and permitting in fiscal year 26 with the start of construction in 2026, but complete in 27. So that's another project that's looking at a more phased approach. The shoreline protection improvements, there was a request to include improvements and scheduled an asset management plan. So this item, we did have some deferred projects that are included. So this is for fiscal year 23, 24, and 25. But also includes those planned improvements that we have for 2026. And then as we are looking at our capital improvements within our other funds, you can see that Don Cesar Boca Ciega Area Resiliency Adaptation Projects does have that $800,000 for design with a $600,000 grant component to it in our fiscal year 2026. Later, and I won't take the commission through all these projects again, but later through each one of those multi-year plans, you can see how we've made changes to any of those requests that we have. So I'm going to breeze through these. And just talk a little bit about our next steps and then answer any questions of the commission. So our next step is we're going to look and take a pretty deep dive into our ad valorem tax analysis, looking at homestead versus non, looking at residential versus commercial. And then we'll have any changes that have occurred from this commission meeting and any recommendations baked in from the Finance Budget Review Committee. At that 8/26 meeting with the tentative budget book, the commission will see where projects for 2025, any reappropriations that we need to make into 2026 for projects that didn't get completed, so that we're really showing a very accurate budget as we move forward. So with that, I am happy to stop talking.
Thanks, Devin. All right, questions? Anybody want to start?
Yeah, I'll take a stab at it. First of all, Devin, thank you so much. That was very informative, especially being the new guy up here. Regarding the Resilient Fund, have we given any consideration to diverting that to the needs of the CIP?
As far as the fund balance that we currently have, we certainly could. As I mentioned, we're just trying to make sure as we go through the comp plan that we're following the intended purpose of that fund. It was started in 2023 and thus far has been utilized for one resiliency project.
Okay, thank you.
I have concerns on the priority-wise on the stormwater clean-out and maintenance, simply because I know that we're about a quarter of the way cleaned out for our storm drains, is my understanding, where we sit right now, 9 months after the storm. And what can we do from a financial standpoint to speed that process up? At this rate, we're 2.25 years down the road before we've covered the whole city, and we're already in another storm season. So that's going to put us 3 storm seasons before we've actually got the whole city. So I have concerns with that, and I believe the residents would as well, considering we just had a bag that clogged up, over on First Palm Point, and we have other issues, major drainage issues in other areas.
I think that could be something that Camden Mills, our Public Services Director, and myself could look at, determining if there's a creative option out there, whether that's contracted or how we can afford it. But we can put our heads together and bring that back.
Right. Okay, great. Yeah, I'd like to see if, an outside vendor to assist us, and compare that cost to a purchase, if we need another vehicle or what we need to do on that. Also, I know the last workshop we talked about, there were a few items deemed as legal requirements. I would like to see that for future as to what those legal requirements are.
Okay.
Statute-wise, whatever that is, because I did have a couple of residents ask me about cameras in parks and things to that effect.
Okay.
And I know it's not a huge amount, $40,000 per year amount, and it was deemed as a priority 1, just that whether those funds can be used elsewhere more to really get us, back on our feet, continue. I mean, because we're basically, a champagne taste on a beer budget here.
Okay. We can bring that back.
I've got a couple questions for you, Devin, that are pretty minor, but I'm kind of curious. One of them is in the recreation fund. One of the line items for income is a little less than $100,000 that's categorized as instructor fees. And I wasn't sure how we were collecting money from, are we making our instructors pay us?
So that would be any time that a resident is doing like a water Zumba class, for example. They're paying an additional instructor cost, since that's instructor led. So that's an item that we are looking at through that operating fee study, but it is something that we do receive. And Mandy could probably tell us if you want to know per instructor.
No, that makes sense. So it's just when it's not categorized as part of the admissions fees, it's separated out into what part is for an instructor versus the facility.
Correct.
Okay. And then in the building fund, one of the expenses is just called an administration fee, and it's about $210,000. Can you elaborate on what that is?
So with any of our enterprise funds or fee generating funds, like the building fund, we have a administrative fee. So that covers the cost of any support that the building fund receives from human resources, IT, finance, legal, city attorney. So some of those areas where, if they didn't have general finance, they'd have to hire someone to do accounts payable or payroll for them, for example. So it's a pretty common practice that with those outside of the general fund, that they are paying a administrative fee or a cost allocation fee is essentially where that's at. Right now, that has a 3% increase on it for 2026. That'll be an item that we focus pretty heavily on during 2026 to really show what is the cost for each department instead of it just being tagged to those enterprise funds, essentially.
Perfect. Okay, yeah, thanks. That's nice. That's nice to know that going forward, we're going to have a much clearer picture of what it costs to run each department, essentially.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
that's great. Okay, thank you. Mr. Mayor, do you have any questions? Nope. Commissioners, any further questions? All right, thanks, Devin.
Thank you.
All right, anything else for the budget workshop? Nope.
No, nothing else.
All right, we are adjourned.